Section 4, Day 3 finishes up the information on linear equations for us in this chapter. We're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. Let's talk about parallel lines first. Parallel lines, there are two facts you can list about them. The first one is about their slopes. Their slopes are the same. They both rise and run at the same rate. They will never intersect. The second is about their y-intercepts. Their y-intercepts must be different. Think about that for a second. They have to be different because if the slopes were the same and the y-intercepts were the same, they'd be the same line. So they would touch the entire time and not never. Parallel lines never ever intersect. They have the same slope but different y-intercepts. Example 1, what is the equation of the line in slope-intercept form? They want it to be parallel to this equation. So before we even keep going, the slope of that original line, which I've underlined in blue, is 4. So they want it to be parallel to that. I'm going to introduce maybe some new notation to you. It looks like a tiny 11. That means parallel. If the original slope is 4, the parallel slope is 4. So basically, we're finding the line that has a slope of 4 that goes through x1, y1, this ordered pair. Now, I recognize that the directions want it in slope-intercept form, but remember, it's usually best to start with point slope. So all we need to do right now is substitute. I get y minus 5 equals 4 times the quantity x plus 3. 5-second time out on that plus for a second. Remember that when you subtract a negative, it turns positive. And our last goal is just to get y equals mx plus b. I'll write it here in case you need to see it. So we need to solve this green equation for y. I'm going to distribute first. Gives me y minus 5 equals 4x plus 12. And adding 5 to both sides gives me y equals 4x plus 17. That is the equation of the line that's parallel to the new line, or to the old line that goes through negative 3, 5. Letter B, they want the equation of line in standard form, which we'll take care of when we're done. But we want it, first of all, parallel to this line right here. Now, the slope of that line is not visibly available to you. So you actually have a couple more jobs in this equation. The first is to get the slope, which means I need y equals mx plus b. So I'm just going to take a second and get it in slope-intercept form first. Go ahead and pause for a second if you need to catch up. The slope of this line is negative 5/3. And parallel slopes are the same. So my parallel slope is also negative 5/3. The ordered pair we're working with is 6, 2. So I'm going to use point slope form to get an equation that I can fix. I get y minus 2 equals negative 5/3 times x minus 6. My end goal is ax plus by equals c. I need x, then y equaling the constant. So the first thing I'm going to do is distribute. Gives me y minus 2 equals negative 5/3 x plus 10. Do that on the calculator if you need to. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Gives me y equals negative 5/3 x plus 12. I want x first, so let's add 5/3 x. At this point, I've got 5/3 x plus y equals 12. And standard form says beyond the order, you cannot have fractions or decimals, so we need to clear that 3 in the denominator. And I'm going to do so by multiplying everybody by 3. Everybody by 3. I end up with 5x plus 3y equals 36. The last kind we're going to talk about are perpendicular lines. Perpendicular just means that they cross at 90-degree angles, at right angles. And so the only thing we can talk about here, technically, is their slope. We can't say anything about their y-intercepts. Perpendicular lines are two lines that have slopes that are opposite reciprocals of each other, which means flip and negate. That's the big idea here. We're going to flip fractions and negate them. So example 2, what is the equation of a line in standard form? First of all, they want it to be perpendicular to this line here, whose slope is a -3. Easier for you to see as a -3/1. In order to get the perpendicular slope, and again, that might be some new notation for you, it's a tiny upside down capital T, you have to flip the -3/1 and negate it. So flipping it makes it -1/3, and negating a negative makes it positive, so it's 1/3. I'm going to use that slope and this x1, y1 to get an equation. Remember, point slope form is usually the easiest place to start, and just manipulate that to get what you want. When I substitute, I get y minus 0, which is just y, equals 1/3 times the quantity x minus 9. I want this to be in standard form according to the directions. So I need ax plus by equals c, no fractions or decimals. So I'm going to start by distributing the 1/3. I get y equals 1/3 x minus 3, subtracting 1/3 x from both sides gives me -1/3 x plus y equals -3. And then to eliminate that fraction, you can't have fractions, I'm going to multiply everything by 3. I end up with -1x plus 3y equals -9. Just a quick disclaimer on standard form, and I know I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Some textbooks require that first term, that x term, to be positive, and ours does not, so we will stick with it being okay to be negative. If it did require you to have a positive leading term, just multiply by a -3 instead of a +3, and you should be good to go. Letter E, they want the line perpendicular to 4x minus 5y equals 3. So let's work with that first. I need to solve it for y. So go ahead and take a second, pause the video, solve it for y, and then come back. So the slope of the original line is 4/5. Which makes the perpendicular slope a -5/4. You flip and negate. We're going to use that -5/4 and this x1, y1 in point slope form, and then do what we need to do to get the final answer. So when I substitute, I get y minus a -3 turns positive, equals -5/4 times the quantity x minus 4. That's point slope form. When I'm all done, I want slope intercept form, which is just solved for y. So I'm going to do so by distributing the slope. I get y plus 3 equals -5/4 x plus 5. Use the calculator on that distribution if you need to. Subtracting 3 from both sides gives me a final answer of y equals -5/4 x plus 2. And that's slope intercept form.